Hi. Okay, we are looking at Genesis 12 today, 12, 1 to 3, the call of Abraham. Now the Lord said to Abraham, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed.
Brilliant. Well, Frog has spent the week building this little platform, so I thought we probably should stand on it. If I fall off, someone can pick up the pieces. Isn't this really exciting? Isn't this just amazing to be together? I don't know about you, I've been looking forwards. I've never looked forward actually to Sunday quite so much as this week. So it's great to be able to meet together, and it's just, thanks so much Amy for leading us into the presence of God, and we're going to sing some more a little bit later on. But over these months we're going to be looking through this central section of Genesis. Genesis really is split into two halves. You've got chapters 1 to 11, which gives us the beginning of everything. And then from 12 through to the end of the book, we've got the beginning of God's plans and purposes through these three families of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And as I've been reflecting on Genesis and reading through it over the last week or so, one of the themes, one of the ideas that's come out to me as I've been reflecting on it has been this very idea of journey. And in fact, we're told in the New Testament that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they all lived in tents. In other words, they were always on the move. They were always on a journey. And then I kind of thought, that's kind of ironic, because at the moment, very few of us are going on any journeys, right? Quite a few of us used to go on journeys, and now we can't, or at least we can, but then you get under house arrest when you get home. So we kind of avoid going on journeys. And so what have these journeys got to do with us? And then I was thinking, actually, in a sense, although we're not going on any physical journeys, geographical journeys over the next few months, I do have a sense that we are on a spiritual journey together. And actually this sense of journey, as we're going to see through the story of Abraham and his descendants, I think will speak really powerfully into our situation of being on this mysterious and rather exciting and sometimes frustrating journey. And actually yesterday, as we were setting up in the woods here, I was chatting to Anna as she was clearing away that lovely path that you walked in via. And we were thinking about journeys, and it suddenly struck me, I love the Lord of the Rings films, the Hobbit films and the stories. And one of the reasons why I love those stories is that they're on a journey, aren't they? Frodo, Bilbo, they're on a journey, they're on the move, they're not static. One of the other things I noticed about a year ago is that those journeys take place through a kind of calendar year. They start at the end of the summer, and then they go through the darkness of winter and death, and then they come out into the hope of spring and new life. And I was kind of thinking, maybe that is the journey that we're going to be going on. The Lord has been very good today. We have sunshine, it is not raining. Who knows what the next 6 months might hold? It almost certainly will get cold and wet, but actually there is a sense that we're on a journey, and that journey might be difficult at times, but there is that hope of life that we're on. And in a sense, that is a picture, isn't it, of the gospel, the Christian story. We go through the darkness, the death of winter. We're looking forward to the spring of God's new life. So we want to think this morning just about Abraham, these first 3 verses, which are really crucial. And just 3 things really about Abraham's journey that he's on from these 3 verses. Firstly, to borrow the first Hobbit film, it was an unexpected journey. Okay? It's an unexpected journey. Well, what do we know about Abraham? The end of chapter 11 gives us a little bit of context about Abraham's life. We know that he comes from a place called which is kind of clever if you're ever in a pub quiz and the question is, where did Abraham come from? Because if you go you're correct. Right? And his father's Terah, so he was obviously a very bad child. Little Terah. Sorry, the puns will end there. But where is It's in present-day Iraq. And we know from Joshua 24 that actually Abraham's whole family, they weren't believers in the true God of Israel as he becomes known. They worshipped other gods. They were polytheists. And so isn't it interesting that Abraham, who's going to become the father of the nation of Israel, who's going to be revered by the three worlds' monotheistic faith, started out as a polytheist? Like, that's kind of unexpected. God takes this guy from this foreign land with different beliefs and then encounters him and makes him the center of this new purpose that he's going to have in his worlds. I kind of find that exciting because it used to be that when I was in universities, atheists would say to me things like, faith is just inherited from your parents. The only reason why you believe is because your parents believe. And of course, you can always turn that one around, because often you find that atheism is also inherited from people's parents, and the only reason they don't believe is because that's what their parents did. But actually what you see in the story of Abraham is that faith is not inherited, actually. And we see that in the New Testament too. Faith doesn't come from our parents. Faith comes from encountering the living God. Yeah. And that's what Abraham experiences. His family background didn't prepare him for this, but he encounters the living God. It's completely unexpected. Faith doesn't come from our family. It comes from an encounter with the living God. That's real faith. And it's lovely seeing Dave Bennett here today. I love Dave's book about how just sitting in a pub, he unexpectedly encounters the living God. Like, totally not what he was expecting. Read his book. If you don't want to spend the money, just ask him to tell you the story afterwards. But it'll whet your appetite. But here's a guy who was completely not thinking about ever becoming a Christian, yet encountered God in the most unlikely place. And here's Abraham encountering God. It's an unexpected journey, and that's what God often does. And don't we want to have a fresh encounter with God? So that's the first thing, it's an unexpected journey. The second thing that I noticed that really spoke to me as I was looking at these verses is that this is a journey of faith. I'm looking again at chapter 12, verse 1. He says, we read, "The Lord had said to Abraham, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you." Isn't it interesting that God tells Abraham to go without telling him where he's going? Okay? And actually that's picked up on in Hebrews, because in Hebrews Abraham is described as this man of faith. But what is it about what Abraham did that is faithful? Well, we read in verse 8, in Hebrews 11, verse 8, "By faith Abraham, when called to go to the place he would later receive as an inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going." Isn't that really interesting? Abraham sets out even though he doesn't know where he is going. I don't know about you, I kind of like to know where I'm going in life. I like to kind of have it all mapped out. I'm used to having it all mapped out. I mean, normally my diary is planned at least 12 months in advance. I know on any given day where in the world I'm going to be, what I'm going to be doing, where I'm going to be staying, and so on. Like, we're used to that, aren't we? We know where we're going. We're used to that in our churches. We like to have our 5-year plans, and we've got it all marked out and our strategy of what's going to happen. They used to say, if you want to make God laugh, just tell him your plans. And that's kind of true, isn't it? Like, as we've just realised, actually, it's kind of hard to make a 5-week plan, let alone a 5-year plan. Like, we're on a journey, and we don't know where we're going. And that can be really disorientating, can't it? But actually, a journey of faith is a journey where you don't know where you're going, but you know who you're going with. That's the point of Abraham's story. He doesn't know where he's going, but he knows who he's going with. And he can trust that God. I think it's a bit like, when you're driving, like I put Google Maps or whatever on my phone, and it tells me everything. It tells me where I've come from. It tells me where I'm going. It tells me where I am. It tells me how long I've got till I get there. It tells me when I'm going to arrive, and so on. Like, I love having all that context. And, you look at it, you can see the delays that are going to come up in 15 miles time. It'll give you diversions. But if I go cycling, I don't use Google Maps because the battery runs down too quick. If I go cycling, I use my Garmin, okay? This is basically like Google Maps for a bicycle. But the only thing is, when you load up your route onto a Garmin, it doesn't actually tell you like where you're going. Like you can't see the whole map. And it doesn't tell you how many miles you have to go. And it doesn't even tell you what time you're going to get there, because I guess it doesn't know how fit you are. All it does is tell you where you are and which turning to take next. And I was thinking, like, actually, if the Christian life was like sat-nav, it would be a lot more like my Garmin than it would be like Google Maps. Like, I kind of want to know where I am, where I've come from, where I'm going, how long it's going to take. I want to see all the delays. And God says, I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to tell you turn left, turn right, keep going. Like, we want to see it all, but God sometimes doesn't, actually, most times, doesn't give us the whole story. He just says, keep following me. Abraham sets out and he doesn't know where he's going, but he knows who he's going with. And it kind of struck me, actually, the best way of cycling is not with a Garmin. When I moved down to Bournemouth, I was in Bournemouth for about 17 years. I used to go out cycling in the New Forest. And the New Forest is a beautiful place to cycle because there's literally hundreds and hundreds of lanes to cycle around. The only problem is, like, because there's hundreds of lanes, you get lost. And apparently during the Second World War, they took down all the road signs to confuse the Germans if they ever invaded. And the joke is that they never put them back again after the war. So I basically just got lost. But then I've got a friend called Pete, and he has lived in the New Forest for his whole life. So if I go cycling with Pete, I can just relax. Because I don't need to know where I am. I don't need to know where I'm going. I just need to stick with him. And I'm okay. I can just relax. And actually that's the journey of faith, isn't it? The journey of faith says we don't necessarily know where we're going. We don't know what hold-ups there might be. We don't know how it's going to pan out, but we know who we're travelling with and we can trust him in the midst of all of that. One of my favourite hymns, it was sung at my baptism a long time ago now, is the hymn In Heavenly Love Abiding. And I was just reflecting on the second verse of that because it's really amazing, where we read, wherever he may lead me, no want shall turn me back. My shepherd is beside me, and nothing can I lack. With his wisdom ever waking, his sight is never dim. He knows the way he's taking, and I will walk with him. The journey of faith says we don't know where we're going, but we know who we're going with. And maybe God's just calling us to trust him with all of the unknowns of our journey as Christians, as God's people. We have no idea what's going to happen, but we can trust the God who does. And then thirdly, before we finish and we go into our groups around the fires, the third thing about this journey, it's an unexpected journey, it's a journey of faith. And thirdly, though, it's a journey of blessing. Because did you notice in verses 2 and 3, 3 times God says, I'm going to bless you. He says, I'll make you into a great nation, I will bless you, I'll make your name great and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. And actually in the book of Genesis, this is really significant because in chapters 1 to 11, all we seem to have had is curses. In fact, we've had 5 times this word curse has been mentioned in 1 to 11. And it looks like the world is just getting worse and worse and worse from chapter 3 onwards. We've had relationships breaking down, we've had murder, we've had people basically rebelling against God. We've got the whole world going into absolute chaos. And by the end of chapter 11, it just looks hopeless. And then in chapter 12, God encounters Abraham, and the whole situation is turned around. And I find that so encouraging because I'm reminded that actually God can step into the bleakest of situations and bring blessing where there's been cursing and bring hope where there's been despair. I don't know about you, but like looking at the news at the moment, it's pretty depressing, right? As I look at the chaos, as I look at what COVID's done, as I look at what the impact of it has made upon people's lives, upon their health, upon their jobs, upon their careers, as I look at the world, as I look at my friends in Belarus and the uncertainty of that situation, as we think about friends in Nigeria, as we think about the situation in China, in Hong Kong, of Uyghur Muslims, like there is so much that just seems so hopeless about our world, and we look at it and sometimes we can be tempted to despair, and then I realise I believe in a God who can step into the most hopeless situations and turn cursing around into blessing. And I believe that often when things seem the most bleak, that's when God can work in the most dramatic ways. And the blessing's interesting, isn't it? He says, I'll make you into a great nation. Well, that seemed unlikely to Abraham in his old age with no kids. And we'll come back to that, obviously, in the story. And then God says, I'll make your name great, which is really interesting because in chapter 11, all the people gather in Babel for one purpose, to try and make their own name great. And they can't achieve it. And now God says, what they failed to achieve by their own human effort and ingenuity, I'm going to do by my blessing upon your life. I love that. Like, God says, I'm going to do what you can't do on your own. And then he says, all people on earth will be blessed through you. And that really sets up the whole storyline of the Bible for us. Because sometimes, I don't know, like, I used to look at Abraham and the story of the Old Testament, and, you know, we talk about God's chosen people. And I used to kind of think that seemed a little bit unfair. You know, like, why did God choose Abraham and not anyone else? And why did God choose Israel and not another nation? And like, why do we get to the New Testament and we talk about ourselves as Christians as being God's chosen people? That doesn't seem fair, does it? It seems like if God's choosing this person, like he's not choosing that person. And I hate that, you know, at school, when it came to picking football teams, like that was my worst moment of the week because I was so bad with my two left flat feet that I was always last. I didn't get chosen, I just got given to the team that still needed another player. And so it just doesn't seem, no, and here's God choosing people, and so we inherently think that must mean he's not choosing everyone else. But actually, verse 3, he says, I will bless you, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. You see, God's purpose in choosing Abraham was not to choose Abraham so that the rest of the world were excluded, but so that the whole world might also have the opportunity to be included. It's totally the opposite to what we might think. And you kind of see that through the Old Testament. So we have people like Ruth and Rahab and people who were not part of God's chosen people. They weren't biologically descended from Abraham, but they encountered the living God and they became part of God's chosen people because this nation was meant to be outward looking, not inward looking. Of course, they didn't do it very well, but in many ways they were a picture of course, what was to happen later, as God sends his ultimate chosen one, Jesus. And then he says to the world, you're invited to join Jesus, my chosen one. And you can join in to what I'm doing. And so actually when I think about it, you know, like, it's not like God's picking a football team and he's like, I'll have you, but I'm not having you. And I'll have you, but not you. But actually, if it was like a football team, God was basically saying, Jesus is my captain. And then if you want to join the team, you're very welcome. That's the storyline of the Bible. God has chosen the captain and we're all welcome to join the team. That's the story of Abraham. It's the story of the Bible. And so if you're not part of the team, the wonderful thing is you can be. Like, this isn't an exclusive club. And we hope, even though the weather might deteriorate, that this group of wild folks in the woods might grow. You're welcome to join the team. We don't know where we're going, but we know who we're going with. But also the point of Abraham is this: when God blesses Abraham and when God blesses his people, that's not just so they can be blessed, it's so that we can be a blessing. And our longing is that not only meeting in this wood week by week will be a place where we encounter the blessing of God, but we pray that through that we will then be a blessing. That as we go back to our homes and as we encounter people through the week, that actually the blessing that we experience in this wood Sunday by Sunday outflows into our homes and into our communities and into our worlds. Because that's the kind of God we serve. So we're on a journey. We don't know where we're going, but we know the God we're going with, and that is exciting. And we're invited to join God on that journey.